Trigger warning. Some of the content that will be talked about in this episode covers a light overview of some specific areas of trauma and abuse, and the talk of suicide attempts will be brought up in this episode, as far as other things that are connected to spiritual experiences and experiences with mental health/mental illness issues. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, welcome back to another long-awaited episode of Kintsugi Talks podcast. Also, Happy New Year. It's almost a whole month into this year, 2023, and it's already proving to be an interesting start of the year for what I've seen in many people in my life, including myself. I wanted to take the time in this episode to give a bit of an update of certain things in my life regarding my spiritual, mental/emotional, and my physical health. I won't share everything, but we'll share particular details that I feel are important and will bring a sense of encouragement and hopefully some comfort to you all that listen. So, with that, let's get into the start of this episode with a word from our sponsor, Anchor. I'll first start out with talking about my physical health, mainly because I feel like for me personally, it's the easiest thing for me to talk about. I've been okay physically, but I know I can be better. As far as me being in remission from B-cell acute lymphoblastic leukemia, everything is in the clear. Going to my checkups and the different little procedures that I have to do here and there every time I do have those checkups can be very exhausting, but as long as I hear that there's good results every single time, then it is all worth it in the end for me. Right now, as far as my physical health, I am mainly trying to focus on being more fit and to better my eating habits. I've shared before, I believe, my struggle with disordered eating that started from when I was very, very young. At the moment, my church is doing a 21-day fast. Now, the most typical and well-known type of fasting is intermittent fasting from food, meaning that you choose a chunk of time in the day where you will not eat anything. Now, being that I struggle with literally wanting to starve myself, and I'm trying to physically, mentally, and emotionally break out of those habits, I chose not to do that. Instead, I have been challenging myself to eat 3 square meals a day. And to be very open and honest, I've been failing at doing that every single day of this fast so far. But I'm trying not to beat myself up about it. Now, when it comes to wanting to be more physically fit, the most I've done so far is doing a lot of walking. Even though the only reason that I have been walking to certain places is because I have no money or not enough money for a MetroCard. But I'm at least getting some movement in my body. As far as exercising goes, I don't mind it. I just feel like it's more of an emotional and mental struggle for me that I've realized. Right now, I'm fat. I consider myself to be fat. Now, I have been skinny before. I believe the weight that I was of when I was skinny was below 180 pounds. Now, I want to add to that I am also 5'10". So, I have always found myself to not be good looking. Whether I was skinny, whether I was small, I never found myself to be a good looking person. So even now, I don't find myself to be a good looking person. And again, that's part of a bigger inner work that I have to do within myself. So because of that, I don't see the point of working out if I don't even like how I look and feel at whatever size that I currently am. All right, let's get into the spiritual next. One thing about my spiritual life is the way I pray and express things to God has changed. Before, I used to be very scared and always second guess myself. Sometimes in certain moments in prayer where I was just really in the moment and I was just really expressing a specific emotion about something that happened, and I would sometimes curse. I would either curse out the person that did something to me, like I would be like cursing out myself for like even feeling a certain type of way, or I would be cursing at God sometimes because I was just really just dealing with that certain emotion that I was dealing with in that moment, or just dealing with and the actual situation itself that was just very overwhelming to me. But along the way, up until now, I've grown confident in the fact that God can handle it because there's nothing He can't handle. There's nothing that is quote unquote too crazy, quote unquote too much for Him. He already knows what I'm thinking and feeling. The point of prayer is to verbally express to God and to build trust and faith in Him, and that you, me, us the people, are giving Him more access to help heal and grow us in those areas that we are talking to Him about. That is what prayer is, and that is why prayer is so important. Prayer is not just about like seeking things from God, wanting God to do something in our life. It's not for God to just move in our lives or for God to just do stuff that we want Him to do, but it's for God to work in us as well. Now, I want to be very, very clear and very straightforward in saying that I struggle with fighting the good fight and keeping my faith every single day. And a big part of that is connected to the fact that I have BPD, my mental health. And for those that don't know, BPD is the acronym for borderline personality disorder. The reason that I even have BPD and how I became diagnosed with it is because the chemical composition of my brain was so altered by the experiencing of very severe traumatic events over and over and over again, like a literal domino effect back to back to back, that my emotional development never became stable. I emotionally never became my own person, if that makes sense. It's called a personality disorder because it literally affects who the person is, how they look and view themselves and others in their lives. And this also affects all the relationships in their lives. And if you take the time to look into BPD, you will see that one of the things that's talked about is how people with BPD will have very unstable relationships. Now, I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to get a clear answer from God as to why He chose me to be living with this. But I also know that He doesn't have to give me an answer. He can heal me from this, but He also doesn't have to heal me from this. Even with that knowledge that I have, I still choose to follow Him. Why? Because He made a promise to me many years ago when I actually wanted to and started to have a relationship with Him. At this point, I had already did like the prayer of salvation when I was about like 12, I want to say. And so this was like a few years later after that. I had a very supernatural experience. If you would want me to share that story in another episode, I would be very happy to. Just let me know. if you want me to share that story. But yes, in this supernatural experience that I had, he literally spoke to me and he made the promise to me that he would never leave me, he would always be with me, and that his love would always be poured out over me. Now, I will say this. Have I gone through significantly more painful things other than the things that have happened in my life up until that point? Yes, I have. Some much so that I could have died or should have ended up dead. Or I could have gone insane and would be possibly in a psych ward by now. But I am here. And the only logical answer I can give is that it's God. It's God for me still being here. Even on days where I question why and how, that is the only answer I can give. Even in the midst of unbelief, of confusion and questions, like, that's the only answer I can give is God. Because even in those seasons, in those moments where, like, even now in this point in my life, like, I still have a lot of questions. I still have a lot of doubt about certain things. I'm still angry about a lot of things. And like, I'm still here. God is still with me, and he is moving through me in ways that I would have never thought possible. And then I question, why would he do that? But it's like, it's God at the end of the day. And that is how God works. Last but certainly not least, I'm going to talk about my emotional/mental well-being. The metaphor/analogy that I like to use oftentimes when I talk about how I've been feeling lately is a weather forecast. The beginning of the month up until about last week, I would describe my weather forecast as thunderstorms with heavy rain and snow and black ice on the roads. From last week up until today, the day that I'm recording this, I would describe it as cloudy skies and fog, but with a warm temperature. Now, the warm that I'm describing is connected to a bit of a confusing thing, actually. Well, it's confusing for me. On one side, there's what I think is this sense of calmness that I feel because of recent big changes that have happened in my life that I have made. But on the other side, I'm questioning the validity of this calmness that I'm feeling. I'm questioning myself, like, am I forcing myself to be calm because I fear that this good moment will go away too quickly? Am I experiencing a manic episode? Or is it both? Or could it really be that God has given me peace about the situation? But why would God allow me to feel good about this? Is this just a setup to, quote unquote, prepare me for yet another painful experience that's part of his plan for my life? Now, what I'm saying is just me being honest, and I'm pretty sure there is other people out there who can relate. And I'm saying this just to say this, really. I'm saying this with the intent of people with willing and open ears and hearts to listen. That's all I want. I have this way of thinking because I've been put through too many experiences where I was physically, verbally, emotionally, and mentally, and sexually abused. I have been lied to, I've been betrayed, and trust was broken one too many times. So it's literally in my head, not my fault, that I struggle with these thoughts. I have lived through these different sequences of pain over and over and over again, to where these thoughts have literally been built up in me, this way of thinking, my emotional, psychological dysfunction because of the trauma that I have experienced. I hate that I have this kind of struggle. I genuinely do. There's a lot of things about it that are out of my control, and it sucks. It really does suck. I have very limited resources when it comes to medical help that I could possibly receive. At the moment, I'm just currently receiving art therapy, which is beneficial. It has been beneficial for me, and luckily, it is free. I have not had to pay for it. I don't have a therapist, like an actual therapist, to where it's like sit-down sessions, I talk with them, things like that. I don't have that because I can't afford one that gives the actual services that I need and am seeking. And I don't have a psychiatrist because I know that they'll want to put me back on medication. As of right now, I've been off medication for a few months. And I don't want to go back on medication. The reason being is that many of my past suicide attempts, a method that I used was overdosing on medication, and the medication was either prescribed to me or it was over-the-counter painkillers that I already had in my cabinet. So as of right now, I truly am trying to do the best that I can as far as my mental and emotional well-being with the resources that I have available. And the rest I am genuinely, literally putting into God's hands. That brings us to the end of this episode. From here on out, I am really working on being more consistent when it comes to making and uploading content on all of my social media platforms, including this podcast, which everything will be linked in the description. I hope you all look forward to what I'll be diving into this season for this podcast. So please make sure to follow the podcast page on Instagram. It's at Kintsugi Talks Pod. It's spelled KINTSUGITALKSPOD for updates, as well as times when I do polls and ask questions in the Instagram stories. And for everywhere else that you can listen to this podcast, literally the links for everything will be in the description of this. And thank you for my listeners who have been with me this whole time and have been patiently waiting for me to upload the next episode of what this is, the second series of my podcast. I know I definitely look forward to having more conversations with you. Thank you so much for listening.